Hey guys, Jay Wilson from Monolith Reporting here. Today we're going to run through a tutorial on how you can automatically update the profiles in Domo. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, if you go into Domo and click here under My Profile, you'll be able to see your profile. Ideally, you should have your picture uploaded. You would have your phone number and contact information. That's great. But what I really like about this profile feature, and I think Domo did a really solid job on it, is it allows you to see what groups you're a part of and what activities you've done and things like this. And it's particularly powerful because when you're new to an organization, it can kind of give you the lay of the land. If somebody says, yeah, talk to Joe Smith, you can look up Joe Smith's profile and kind of get an idea of who they report to, who their peers are, and who their direct reports are. But unfortunately, this feature of Domo, I think, doesn't get used a lot because the process of keeping this up to date is onerous, to say the least, right? Nobody likes doing this task. But it is pretty cool because I can go here into view profile and I can see, hey, I've got this guy, Brett Gibson. He's got 284 reports. And under Brett is this guy, Simon. Let's go look at this guy, Simon. Simon has these reports. And here's Anna. And under Anna, there's Jay. That's So how can we automate keeping this up to date? We know what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and inspecting the network traffic. I'm going to click on add person here. Live. We're going to go over here. I'm going to add a report and say, pick someone random. Nihar reports into me. All right. So now we, of course, have to figure out where that happens in our API. So here in the Teams API, I can see we hit the API content users, the Teams API, it was a post, and the body contained direct report. And alternatively, if I just want to update who I report to, give myself a little promotion, and I'll report into Brett. Now I'm right at the top. Okay, and again, this time it says reports to. Now, I wonder what happens if I have multiple people reporting into me. I'm going to add a second person here. We're going to hit our Teams API again. And notice that under direct reports, it contains an array. That array is containing the user ID and who that user was. So I can't add one person at a time using the API. I have to say everyone who is a direct report of mine. Again, looking at an array. We need to get good at noticing the differences between arrays and objects. Even with the, who I report to, that's also an array. And little things like that are going to trip us up as we get started playing with the API. So let's pay attention to that as we start monitoring network traffic. Cool. How are we going to do this? Well, I'm obviously not going to type everyone's name in one at a time, and I don't have an HR system that tells me who I report to. Although in real life, if you try to do this tutorial, grab your HR data, get your employees and who they report to, and you'll be able to recreate this. What I did though is I grabbed the Domo stats. I grabbed the Domo stats data set, and basically I faked it. I said, hey, come to me. All right. For each user, they can have a randomly generated number of children who report into them, is basically how I did the thing. And then for each person, I gave them a row ID. So for example, Brett has row ID 1, and then I used for your random number of children, you've got 5 children. And then I said, okay, well, use the row group to say that this is your parent. So all of these 5 people report into are part of row group 1, which is functionally user ID 1. And then for the next set of people, the next person has 3 children, and those 3 children report into row group number 2, who I believe was okay. So basically, I'm just generating a data set whose output will look like this. 1 row per person, the relationship, and with whom they have that relationship. Now, in our case, I include direct reports as well as reports to. For your case, just do reports to. If you define who you report to, you don't also have to define who your children are. Domo's smart enough to figure that out. Okay. So this is our data set. This is the data set ID. This is something you reasonably could get out of your HR database. Now, how do I get it to automatically update Domo? How do I generate all of these API requests that I'm going to need? Let's pop into our code and take a look. Now, again, I've done a whole bunch of tutorials on this topic. I'll try to link the relevant ones so you don't have to watch all of them, but I'm going to skip stuff that I've covered elsewhere. We are going to use our authentication pipeline. We're going to need both the session token and the developer token for this project because some of the data sets we hit are documented under developer.domo.com and others of them are not. The first thing we need to do is we need to get that data set into JavaScript. So to query that data set, I wrote a wrapper function called dsDataset. I know that I'm going to hit developer.domo.com APIs, so I need my developer token. Developer.domo.com API. Right. So the documentation here for how to query a data set is this. We know we're going to post against a public API. I need that developer token, and I'm going to send a proper SQL query to get the data out. That's kind of fun. All right. So I'm going to go show you. Previously, I created a dsDataset function that uses a switch to do different things. So create a data set, update the schema, and now I have a function called query data. To query the data, I'm going to, again, hit that query API and just in the body, pass in my SQL query. Cool. Let me console log that result so we can quickly see what that looks like. Because in this code, I am doing a whole bunch of mental gymnastics to get the data into the right shape. So the data coming back from the Domo API looks like this. You get an object that has some metadata, including the schema. It tells you the columns that are being returned, and the rows are an array of the row values. And this is a little bit of a pain to work with because in JavaScript and Python, we're more accustomed to being able to refer to, hey, I want for row 1, this is a user, this is an action, this is the body ID. So I need to restructure my data so that I don't have an object with nested arrays, but rather one object that has all of the stuff in it. So as part of my query data action, I'll restructure my data such that I map over the rows array. And remember, the rows array contains arrays. And then for each row, I'm going to take the columns array, which has the column names, and then I'm going to reduce it into an object. So here I'm saying, hey, declare an object called S and give that object a property called whatever column I happen to be on. So right now, the first time through, it'll be say, hey, give it a property called user ID. And then the user ID property is equal to whatever my row index is. Sorry, whatever the index is. So I'm on the first row of my data set and get that value from my row array. Destructure it, accumulate it, and reduce. Yeah. So what does that mean, Jay? What we end up getting back from our data set will look like this. Remember I said we need to start getting better at identifying the difference between an object and an array. And objects and arrays behave slightly differently. So what I get back is one array, which I recognize by the square bracket, and each element of my array represents a row of my data set. But now it's an object instead of an array. And the object has a property called user ID, a property called action, and a property called body ID that I can refer to using dot notation. Very cool. Now, again, is this the most efficient way to do this for this specific project? No, there's probably a smarter way I could have done this, but it is recyclable code. Anytime I hit the dataset API, I really do want to get an object or an array of objects where each object represents a row. Cool. So the only problem we have now is if you think about our API here, what it's expecting is when I go to update my reports, maybe I should inspect traffic. When I go to update my reports, I'm supposed to pass back an array of all of the people that report into me. Are you going to throw an error? It's supposed to give back an array of all of the people that report into me. And currently my data set is one row per relationship. So again, I need to collapse this so that if this person has 5 or 6 reports, there's just one element and the body contains all of the people. All right. So the easiest way to do that is actually to go back from an array into an object. And what I want to do is I want to have an object where each property represents one person. It's kind of like the idea of having a primary key. An object, each property can only the property can only exist one time. Functionally, that's the same thing as a primary key. And so I can, well, I'll just walk you through the code. We're going to take my array and we're going to reduce it into an object. And each row represents a relationship. And so every time I go through a new row, I need to ask, hey, does the person already exist? If that person exists, modify what we know about that person. Add in the new relationship. And that's what this code is doing here. It's testing, does this user exist? And does the relationship type exist? Remember, I can have a report to or a direct report. And what I said to you guys earlier, you really only need to do who you report to. You don't have to do your direct reports. So this bit of code, while interesting, is maybe overcomplicating. In any event, if the action type reports to or direct reports already exists, then take that array, destructure it, which is what that dot 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 means, and add in the new body ID, the new person, the new relationship. If this action does not exist because maybe it's my first time through and I've got my reports to, but I don't have my direct reports property. So if the property doesn't exist, then add it as a new property. Otherwise, I assume this is a net new person and just set them up. I should probably post this code on GitHub because getting a chance to kind of step through this, I think, is a pretty slick way to learn how to manipulate arrays and objects. If you're interested in that, let me know. Okay, so this is the output. Let me scroll up to our top here. Notice it's a square bracket. which tells us that because it's a square bracket, because it's not a square bracket, it's a squiggly bracket, it's an object, and each property, each user is a property. That's how I know I've got my primary key. And inside that user property, we have who they report to. And if they have direct reports, we have that set up as a separate property of the user property. Now this is good. It gave us the structure that we need to kind of translate the initial data set into something we can work with in JavaScript. But now I want to hit the API. The thing about objects is they're not iterable. I cannot loop over each of the properties. That's not something you can do with an object. So now I actually need to go back and turn this into an array. To convert this into an array, I'm going to take my object and I'm going to pass it into object.keys. What that will do is it will create an array of user IDs, or really an array of all of the properties of this object. And then for each user, I'm going to say, hey, declare an object where the key is equal to a property called user ID, and then look up this property in the original object, and then destructure that as part of this new object I'm returning. God, I'm using the word object way too often. It's one of those things, like, if you understand it, you're golden, and if you've never seen this before, you're probably wondering, what am I talking about? The end result is this. I now have an array. The thing about arrays is they have no concept of primary key. They just have stuff inside of them. They consist of objects. So this array has object 0, object 1, object 2, object 3. And it just happens to have a property called user ID 27. And it also has, this object has a property called reports to. But again, arrays have no concept of primary key or uniqueness, but that was something that was necessary for my API. That's the whole reason we're going through these mental gymnastics. All right, I can now map over my array of users and hit my API. Now, because I have many API calls going on, I have to use promise.all to say, wait until I get a response from every object in my array. I'm going to map over my array, and each element in my array is a user. And if the reports to property exists for that user, then I'm going to define my body as the reports to array. Remember, that's the list of people. And then I'm going to pop that over to my API. Let me jump into the users function. Man, this is actually the easiest part. Hitting an API is the easiest part. It's everything that came up to this point, which is why you may or may not have already left the video. We know the query based off of monitoring network traffic, and then we're saying my body. If I'm using the direct reports action, my body should be shaped as an object with direct reports, and then the array of the members. An array of the members represented as an object with user ID dot username, user ID. It has to look like this, right? That's the whole point of all of this exercise. Getting the data from the point where it was like my CSV file into a series of API requests. Why are you telling my code is broken? Let me not here. At the end of the day, I'm going to send my, I'm going to hit the API, and then it's going to give me a response that says, these are my reports to, here are my peers. And if I have any direct reports, it will list those as well. What you'll notice is, here, I'll go ahead and manually say that, page here, if I manually go here and say who my reports are, when I run my automation, this should reset it based off of what my HR system told me or what my fake data set told me. So when I go here and refresh, this should be based off of the most recent data from my HR system. Again, for those of you who have large organizations, this is the kind of thing that you would want to trigger and set up to run every day or however often you like go through hiring processes so that you can make sure that your data is up to date with your HR system. Now, that said, if your HR system isn't up to date, then garbage in, garbage out. But my goal in all of this was to give you guys a way to automate maintaining your org chart in Domo, walk you through a little bit about hitting those APIs, and then also give you a little bit of information about how you can manipulate objects and arrays in JavaScript. I hope this was useful for you. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. If you want the code, go ahead and email me at jae@onyxreporting.com. We'll see what we can work out. Y'all have a good one.